The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. At that time Jesus said to his disciples, "Just as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the days of the Son of Man. They were eating and drinking and marrying and being given in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, just as it was in the days of Lot, they were eating and drinking, buying and selling, planting and building. But on the day when Lot went out from Sodom, fire and sulfur rained from heaven and destroyed them all. So will it be on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. On that day, let the one who is on the housetop with his goods in the house not come down to take them away. And likewise, let the one who is in the field not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to preserve his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will keep it. I tell you, in that night there will be two in one bed, one will be taken and the other left. There will be two women grinding together, one will be taken and the other left." And they said to him, "Where, Lord?" He said to them, "Where the corpse is, there the vultures will gather." The Gospel of the Lord. So when we look at the first reading for today, we can see that foolishness is described as those who are unable to see things from a spiritual perspective, which is to see things from God's perspective. And so he says, all men who were ignorant of God were foolish by nature, and they were unable from the good things that are seen to know him who exists. So this is what the Book of Wisdom is telling us, is just simply how God speaks to us through the order of his creation. So by looking at creation, we can perceive at least an intelligent designer behind that creation. And says, but they did not recognize him in his works. And so what they did is they attributed basically they attributed a godlikeness to the created things instead of to God himself. And you see that in today's kind of like more modern theories, where they exaggerate things like evolution to this idea of what they describe eventually, if you get scientists to try and describe what evolution is in itself, they describe it as in different ways, but essentially as something like an unknown intelligent force that drives nature towards its survival, or something like that. It's to try and attribute certain godlike activities to being within the material of nature itself instead of towards God. And so what we see then is that in his creation he speaks. So in everything that is created, God speaks in terms of his wisdom and his goodness and his beauty. And then also what we see is that also in the events of life, there are things to be perceived, both the coming of God and his righteousness, but also the coming of destruction, that there are consequences to human action that draw upon themselves destruction, especially if civilization goes in certain directions. And so what the Lord then speaks about in today's gospel is this foolishness or dullness in terms of being unable to perceive spiritual things or reality as it is, essentially. To see things as they are from God's perspective comes because of a lack of relationship with God, because of a lack of prayerfulness, because of a lack of righteousness. And living in sin brings a certain dullness to the soul that makes us then unable to perceive spiritual realities or reality as it is. And so he says, and he gives the warning, just as it was in the days of Noah, is that they were eating and drinking, marrying and being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. So what the Lord is saying is that it was just normal life until the day in which Noah entered the ark. And so they were just continuing with life as normal until it came upon him. It wasn't like it was anything spectacular happening. It was just simply that they weren't attentive to God. They weren't perceiving what God was doing and the work that he wanted them to accomplish, except for Noah, who was in this relationship with God, this conversation with God, so that he was then able to perceive reality as it was and the way in which it was heading. And then also he gives the same example with Lot in Sodom as well. And they were also doing the same thing. They were eating and drinking, buying and selling, planting and building, going about normal daily life, but unable to perceive the way in which they were heading, the destruction that they were bringing upon themselves by their actions and by their sin. And so it rained upon them, it says, fire and sulfur, destroying them all. So will it be on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. That the Son of Man will be revealed, and people will probably just be going about their ordinary business and not recognize what is happening in terms of what God is doing in the world. This happens on a daily basis, in a certain sense, with regards to the Mass, right? The Lord is present here on earth. The Lord comes to earth. God is present on earth. And yet people go on with their daily lives as if nothing has happened. There's a certain imperception, an inability to perceive the spiritual reality of what is happening here. God is with us, and yet there is at least a lack of response from the majority in terms of responding to the wonder of this mystery. And so it requires for us who are at least perceiving the spiritual reality of what takes place here, to continue and persevere in that, because there is a certain ordinariness that we can also fall into ourselves, that we perceive the reality of what is happening, and that also then we proclaim this reality, that we proclaim the reality of God on earth, God with his people, and it is the Eucharistic mystery, right? God present to his people that we proclaim. And so then what we see is that there is also then a warning to those who are perceptive, to those who are perceiving what is God's will. And he says, on that day, let the one who is on the housetop with his goods in the house not come down to take them away. And so what the church fathers say on this, at least some of them, they say that the one on the housetop is the one who is looking up into the heavens, right? So it is the one who is already in conversation with God. Let nothing take you away from that when things are difficult, or when there is persecution, or when there is any temptation to return into the house and to the goods of the house, or to the goods of this world. Choose always the goods of heaven. And so it is let the one on the housetop basically remain there, not to come down and to take away the good things in the house. Then it says, likewise, the one who is in the field, not to turn back, because the one who is already plowing and accomplishing and doing God's work, don't turn back for any reason to give that up, right? We simply persevere in that. And so what he says, and the warning that he gives is, remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to preserve his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will keep it. So meaning simply to lose our life into God, meaning to give to him everything that we are and all that we are. To lose ourselves in him is to find ourselves. And so it is through our prayer, it is through our labor for the proclamation of the gospel and evangelization. These are what we are called to, and not to turn back from them for any reason, not to turn back to earthly things, but to persevere in those things, not the ordinary works of life, which, yes, we all have to do ordinary works of daily life, but to maintain before our hearts the reason why we do them, which is for the glory of God. And then what he says is, he says, I tell you, in that night there will be two in one bed, one taken, another left, and there's two who are grinding together, and they will also, one will be taken, another left. And so it is this representation of the fact that it is with regard to the interior that the Lord judges. And so you have two examples of two people doing exactly the same thing, and yet one is taken and another left. So what is the discerning principle? It's the interior, it's the heart. It's the one who has the relationship with God or not. And so even though the exterior human actions can be the same, it is the interior disposition and reality that the Lord looks at. He looks at our interior, he looks at our heart, and that is what he judges. And so then what it says is, and they said to him, where, Lord? And he said to them, at least as it's translated here, where the corpse is, the vultures will gather. There is debate over this translation, and so I'm not attempting to settle the debate, but I definitely lean on one side of this debate. And so the translation here, the translation is, where the body is, there the vultures will gather. But the other word that it could be used is the eagles, right? So where the body is, sometimes it gets translated as corpse, but the word in the Greek is not necessarily a dead body. And so where the body is, there the eagles will gather. Some of the church fathers, they translate that in a certain sense like the Eucharistic mystery, right? So where the body of Christ is, where the temple is, there the eagles gather. And it is, and so I think that's one way at least in which it can be interpreted. It's not the only way, and so sometimes it does get translated in this way. But I think that it kind of makes more sense personally with what the Lord is saying they are saying to him, well, what should we do? And he is saying, where the body is, the eagles will gather, meaning that it is to this work of participating in the salvific mystery of Christ's own sacrifice, right? The destruction of his body, the temple, but then also the resurrection of his body, the temple. And it is to this mystery, to Christ himself, that the eagles gather, namely the ones that soar, right? The ones that are in the spiritual realities. And so I think that's one, at least, interpretation of it. But the gospel essentially today is calling us out of a spiritual dullness into a spiritual perceptiveness, and that is through faithfulness to prayer. So faithfulness in our prayer, both as the common prayer of the church, which we gather here to celebrate the common prayer of the church, but also in our personal piety. That also in our personal piety we maintain that with faithfulness every day and keep that relationship with God, opening up our hearts to the discernment of spiritual realities. Amen.